You are watching Access LaPorte County, Channel 97. Coming up next is the April 26th meeting of the Michigan City Plan Commission. You can find information for this meeting by visiting www.accesslaportecounty.org.
Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, April 26th, 2022 at 6:05. And this is the regular monthly meeting of the Michigan City Plan Commission. Before we do roll call, I just want to introduce everybody. Phil Latchford is rejoining the commission. So we're glad to have him back. And I'd like to introduce Ross Balling, our newest member of the commission. So welcome to both of you. So then roll call, Skylar.
Mr. Balling.
Here.
Mr. Fitzpatrick. Mr. Granquist. Mr. Gresham.
Present.
Mr. Klinder.
Here.
Mr. Latchford.
Here.
Mr. Zimmer.
Here.
And Mr. Hale.
Present.
Present. We have a quorum.
And just a reminder, since there's only 5 commissioners here this evening, that every petition in order to pass, every vote has to be unanimous. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our last regular meeting, which was February 22nd. Oh, sorry. Next item would be approval of the agenda for this evening.
If no changes are needed, I would move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
Mr. Balling.
Yes.
Sorry, give me a second here. Mr. Gresham.
Yes.
Mr. Klinder.
Yes.
Mr. Latchford.
Yes.
Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Motion approved.
So now the approval of the minutes from February 22nd. I assume everybody had a chance to review them. And if there's no comments about them or changes, then we're ready for a motion to approve.
I would also move to approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Mr. Balling.
Yes.
Mr. Gresham.
Yes.
Mr. Klinder.
Yes.
Mr. Latchford.
Yes.
Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Motion approved.
The first petition this evening, is there somebody here to introduce that?
So our first petition tonight is petition 900-22, request by WP21 LLC for concept plan approval. Actually, there's 2 requests tonight: concept plan approval and development plan approval. And this is for a 14-lot major subdivision known as Beechwood Subdivision, located on an approximate 2.71 acres parcel, situated generally between Jake Lane on the north, Washington Park Boulevard on the south, Lorraine Road on the west, east of the residential lots, and Childers Lane on the east, represented by attorney Daniel Granquist and John A. Doyle, an associate surveyor and engineer. And I believe Mr. Granquist is in attendance on electronic, but I do believe Mr. Doyle would be presenting the petition tonight, and I do believe the developers are here as well. I'll hand it off to Mr. Doyle.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Doyle. I'm the engineer and surveyor, and I've got into the position of presenting the petition for you tonight. This is Mr. Nazar, the developer, and his associate, and this is my associate, Mr. Darrell Wright. As was said, this is a 14-lot subdivision on approximately 2.7 acres. on Washington Park Boulevard. I guess I would call it from Liberty Trail, where it crosses the railroad, and then since going west to Lorraine Road in the Washington Park subdivision. This is lots range from approximately 6,700 square feet on the west, be lot 1, to about 9,200 square feet on the east. This property tapers as it goes from west to east. We propose to develop it with residential housing, or one-car garage, and all the necessary water, sewer, and stormwater is done by bioretention swales that will be constructed on a free-form basis depending on where trees wind up and gradients wind up, or gradients of the lawn, where they wind up once the development is completed. As I said, we have sewer, sanitary sewer coming in from the north side of the property. We also have water on the north side of Washington Park Boulevard. I believe that's a 20-inch main. So I believe everything that we have falls within the ordinance for this development. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer.
Mr. Doyle, could you explain the need or why the bioretention areas are necessary, considering that we have sanitary and sewer available?
Well, that's for stormwater. There is no stormwater sewer in the immediate area. So this is our way of disposing of the stormwater runoff rather than having that in a large pond, I'll say. It'll be throughout the development. Soils are basically sands, so percolation and so forth is about as good as it gets.
Thank you.
I do have one quick question. Skylar, I don't know if you know this or not, but I know, gosh, it's been 10, 11 years ago, the last time something Major Beach Walk came before us, they wanted to close an access road in this area. And before we really get too far down the line, I don't know if it's appropriate now, but does this area involve that access road? Is this in the plans? Is it still there? I know back then sanitation and emergency were very concerned about losing that access. So I just wanted to verify that was
Well,
still...
the access road to Beach Walk is owned by Mr. Nassar, but it is not part of this development. So it remains in its present status.
So this plan has no change on that access?
No.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and I could expand a little bit more. You were correct. Your explanation is spot on. It was due to emergency access, having a rear entrance, if you will, to get there quicker from the fire department on 12. I think that was an issue. It remains. It is part of the mother track, but it isn't part. It isn't going to be developed or anything like that. It remains, and at the time when the developer. I guess it just has to remain. It's through a reciprocating easement. So he would have to work with Beach Walk to probably do whatever he decides to do with it.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, excuse me, aren't we talking about that Childers Lane?
No, it's right here, Fred.
Be on the far right of the drawing.
I don't know that it has necessarily a name. It's not officially a road. It was just mainly an easement with an access for emergencies at the time.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. It was
Well,
never officially designated, but it was definitely designated as access in the original plans.
I'm pretty sure there's a street sign there that says Shoulders Lane that runs to the back side of Beach One.
Yeah, and that might be true. We're not in charge of those. I don't know that these roads are all private anyway, so we're not in charge of them if it is. I will point out, it looks like they're leaving whatever that easement at probably 40 feet. They're not even encroaching on it. So they're just leaving the 40-foot access road there.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So tell us a little bit about your plans for the trees.
For the trees, sir?
Yes.
Well, we propose to leave as many as possible. Grading of the property is going to remove some of them. I think we can probably give you a count of how many is out there, but and a guess as to how many will remain. But that's why we're free forming those retention areas so that we can work around the existing trees. Well, I guess it's a matter of, as best we can, to save all of the trees or the decent ones that live. So it's kind of hard to tell at this point just exactly what's going to happen.
Thank you. Skylar, do you want to give your report?
Sure. If I could just add something about the tree survey. They did provide a tree survey. You have it. It's the big document, the big wide document. So our code designates that they can go outside of the building footprint. I believe it's 10 feet outside of it. Anything inside that 10 feet can be removed for the construction. But I think the intention of the developer is to leave as much as possible because they want treed backyards. So hence the free forming of the pond. I won't call them ponds. I don't want to call that's the wrong term, but retention bioswales. Typically in a development like this, you would go in and mow it all down, and then you would build a big pond that would take all of this development. This one really doesn't afford it to do that. You're losing a lot of land at that point in time. Plus you're losing all the trees, which is kind of a bonus there, in my opinion. So I think they're trying to work around the trees, hence why they provided this survey to us. And they're not building one big pond to take all of the storm detention. Okay, I'll talk about it. Case number 900-22. This is Michigan City Planning Commission. This is Beechwood Subdivision Concept and Development Plan. The request is for approval of concept and development plan approval to create a 14-lot subdivision located along Washington Park Boulevard. It should be noted that this acreage is 2.71 acres. There's 14 lots being subdivided. Staff analysis. The property in question is currently vacant and was previously part of a subdivided subdivision. The surrounding uses are single-family residential and are zoned R1E to the north, south, and west, and M2 industrial to the east of the site. So that would be the SciTech you see to the east, as noted. Joint Development Ordinance 04.04, Building Dimensional Requirements, subsection I, standards applicable to the R1E district. Number 1, subdivision of land. Any subdivision or re-subdivision of land shall require a concept plan followed by a development plan followed by a primary plat for review and approval by the Plan Commission at a public hearing in compliance with the requirements of the 1400 series of Indiana Code 36-7-4 prior to submission of an application for primary plat review. Tonight, the petitioners before the Planning Commission to ask for the concept plan and development plan approval to move to the next step, which is the primary and secondary approvals. The petitioner has provided a traffic study completed by Premier Engineers. I handed you guys out a copy of that, which concluded that the development will not produce an appreciable impact on existing traffic conditions. No modifications to traffic controls will be required as well. It should be noted that the street width at this location is 56 feet of right-of-way and approximately 22 feet of pavement with two travel lanes. It should also be noted that petitioner is not requesting a sidewalk waiver. One of the things that was in the report, you will see, one of the talking points was that there wasn't a sidewalk there. So he's not requesting a waiver. He will be, and he's aware of this, and they will be required to develop it as it's constructed. So they'll have to put the sidewalk in. Let's see here. Sorry, I lost my track here. On April 18th, 2022, the petitioner did participate in a development review committee, and there were no concerns about the utility connections or proposed subdivisions. There's a permanent 20-foot sanitary easement between lots 6 and 7 that may service the subdivision. Sanitary also commented that it preferred the bioretention areas as shown on the proposed plat rather than a big pond to take it all, because they also mentioned that there wasn't stormwater at this location during that meeting. Staff recommendations. Staff has reviewed the proposed development plan and offers the following. Staff finds that the criteria required for the submittal and approval has been satisfied and recommends approval of the concept and development plan.
Thanks, Skylar. Mr. Hale, do you want to give your report?
Yes, sir. My attorney report for petition 900-22, paren 1, the concept plan, and paren 2, the development plan. The petitioner subdivider property owner WP21 LLC, requesting concept plan and development plan approval. The petitioner, as Mr. York just told you, has filed a request for approval of a concept plan and a development plan for this proposed 14-lot major subdivision on approximately 2.71 acres. The primary fact I would point out at this point is that the land is zoned R1E, our waterfront residential zoning district. And it is because it is zoned R1E that the developer is required to submit both the concept plan and the development plan under our zoning ordinance. As Mr. York told you, he's had a development review with department heads, and Mr. York is entitled to submit the concept plan to this body for review. Your function as to the concept plan is to assist the developer in making recommendations, suggestions, and guiding him in the direction of compliance with our subdivision ordinance and our zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan. As to the development plan, you are to consider that development plan and determine if it is satisfying our zoning ordinance and the development requirements found there and our subdivision ordinance. You may then, following a public hearing on this matter, simply approve the development plan. You may approve the development plan with required conditions, or you may disapprove the development plan. As I think you understand, our zoning ordinance then requires that the next step in this process is to submit a primary plat, again for Plan Commission review and approval. So what we're seeing tonight is a 3-step process. We've combined the first two, concept plan, development plan, and you are going to consider that and perhaps approve it or not shortly. I would note then that I've had an opportunity, because we are required to have a public hearing. I've had an opportunity to review the notice documentation submitted by the petitioner. I find that he's met the requirements, and you're free to consider this matter this evening if you wish.
Thank you. Hearing the reports then, are there any further questions or discussion regarding this petition?
I do have one more quick question for Mr. Hale. Then, would it be appropriate for our votes tonight to be one combined vote, or should we vote concept then development separately?
I think what is specifically appropriate is to have one combined vote. You can approve the concept plan. Really, that's more of an assistance on your part, and approve both the concept plan and the development plan, which does require your approval. So I would say one motion approving both would be fine.
Excellent, thank you. And then I did have one more general question on the plan itself. I take it by the drawings, I don't see it officially said anywhere, that there is only automobile access on the Washington Park Boulevard side, correct? That's what it looks like? Thank you. Correct. And then would there be like walking access to the back of Beach Walk? Is this considered? Okay.
No, this is so that's why I really wanted to do that traffic analysis. But if you look at Washington Park Boulevard, it's perpetuating the pattern that already exists on Washington Park Boulevard. We have installed some sidewalk down there, and I would assume we're going to continue to install sidewalk. Hence why I didn't want the waiver. But our trail comes out at Liberty Park, so the idea is that if we can make it better to get pedestrians across, 12. I'll say across 12, which is really a barrier, we should try to encourage Washington Park Boulevard to become more pedestrian friendly, bicycle friendly, et cetera, to get people to that trail. Hence why we're doing this. It's perpetuating these lots. If you think about them, they're actually really big lots. I might add that in. The R1E, the minimum size lot is 5,000 square feet. These lots exceed that, and they exceed the required minimum footage. Yeah, they exceed that. So it really looks small on this site plan. But I was thinking, like, really, you're not backing out into Washington Park, but you're actually getting probably more generous lots than most of the lots on the boulevard. So just wanted to add that in to that. Sorry.
No problem. And I would also add that I do like the idea of sidewalk continuing. The connection into that neighborhood, that Liberty Trail area there across the highway would be excellent.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Is there any public comment regarding this petition? Please step up to the mic and state your name and address. Sure, that's fine. Yep.
Hi, Rachel McCormick. Sorry.
Why don't you just state your name and address?
Sorry, I thought I was loud enough. Rachel McCormick, 214 Mary Lane. My main concern is the stormwater issue. And I was very worried by being told that what they're doing is as good as it gets. Maybe people here are not aware of the stormwater issues we have in Beach Walk and the water issues overall. In the rear part of Beach Walk, which is Caisson Park, which goes from Joe Lane, which you'll see on your map, back to Rory Court and then all the way to Lake High. We do have a stormwater system, which is badly needed. We've had probably 5 houses on Mary Lane flood because of the high water table in that area. It's a very, very low-lying area, very, very high water table. And we have massive amounts of stormwater. Jake Lane, we have had just last year had to install dry wells to try and deal with the stormwater that we have. And what we find in Beach Walk, as our lots over the past couple of years, as I'm sure you're all aware, have become to be finished. We've had a lot of vacant lots for a long time, especially in that back area. And as they're now being finished and all the trees are being taken down, we, as a house gets built, we find ourselves with another issue and having to spend thousands and thousands of dollars because we're private development, we're looking after our own roads, our own storm drains. So we end up spending a lot of money every time a house gets built with having to deal with this stormwater issue. So because these houses are right, on our doorstep, the plan for this bioretention plan for the stormwater really has a lot of concerns for Beach Walk, in my opinion. If you've driven around Beach Walk, you can see we have detention ponds. We have 2 retention ponds in the Quezon Park neighborhood. We have one in our playground, and we have one just on the other side of Jake Lane in Camp Court to try and deal with the water that we have. Besides from our other, detention ponds in the rest of Beach Walk, we also have Lake High that our stormwater system drains into. So we have lots of options, I know, and I know they don't have many options, but you're taking down I don't know what acreage Skylar says it was, 2-point-something acres of trees. And that's going to cause a lot of water problems. That's in Beach Walk. What we do as houses are being built, we try and limit the amount of trees coming down, and then we only give them permission to build on the basis of they are replanting trees to try and deal with this water problem. So for me, that would be my biggest concern here. I mean, it's land that can be developed. I don't have really an issue with that. I think it could be less houses. I'm a little bit worried about the railroad tracks there and the traffic that builds up on that road when you're trying to get out when the train is crossing, or in the morning when the I don't know what that train is called, the train that comes out of the plants beside us. Well, the one that's at the SciTech, or not, the industrial train, that it blocks the road for a long time. You got a very long line of traffic there. So that's, a concern as well. Obviously, you're adding 14 more houses to get out there, but the stormwater would be my biggest issue in this development. So that's my comment. Oh, I did have a question that I didn't understand. So it says it's a major subdivision. Does that mean that it is it a private development that would have its own association, or these houses are just part of Michigan City?
Major, minor, just determined by the number of lots.
Okay. And is it one developer developing and building the houses, or they plan to sell them off, or does that not make any difference here?
Doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
It's really an administrative act at this point in time if they meet the criteria with respect to, it's a 50-foot lot, 5,000 minimum. That's more the administrative act of it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how they sell them, take them down, build.
Yeah.
That's your zoning code that requires
Okay. Yeah.
that
I just
controls
didn't
that.
understand that part. Just the other thing that we have been doing in Beach Walk where people are building is we've been asking them to provide a study in relation to, we've had companies come in and assess the lot and say, what square footage they can cover in permeable and impermeable surfaces, and that, even though they are obviously platted and they can build, we've been trying to take extra measures because we have such a major, major problem with water in our development. So yes.
With respect to the bioretention ponds and so forth, the nature of the land or the gradient doesn't lend itself to a big pond. And the smaller areas of bioretention areas are, by calculation, more than adequate to take care of any stormwater runoff. There is no stormwater runoff from this site to an off-site area. So it doesn't affect any of the homes to the north or whatever. When I said that it's as good as it can get, it's sand, and it has a very high percolation rate. I can give you a series of numbers and so forth, but it's more than adequate to take care of the stormwater from the development. These lots, I might add, are quite a bit bigger than some of the lots that are in the Beach Walk area, which creates whatever size home they build, it takes more of the land that would be available for percolation than what we would be doing with this particular development.
And the stormwater we're talking about is really just what comes off of the roof. Is that correct?
Right, off of the garage roof, and you've got some hard surface area as far as the driveways are concerned. But
We have impervious surface as well in our zoning code. It's all in the zone. That's zoning. That's not subdivision code. That's the zoning code. So when he comes in with his site plan, he'll have to have a calculation of there's X number of impervious surface. I believe in R1E it's 55% you can cover with impervious. So 50. I think Mr. Doyle explained it right. These lots are in excess of 5,000 square feet. Some are near 6, if not more. Anyways, they're just bigger lots. So there's more surface to absorb water.
Step up and give your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Nazar Krivko. Living in Chesterton, 1487 Hogan Avenue. Also, I want to add to what John says that all our buildings, if you're going to look at the plan, they push to the front, to the Washington Boulevard. And like Mr. John said, the back, we try to leave as much untouchable as possible. So there is definitely, from my understanding, there going to be no effect from the roof and driveway to the back area, because back area is completely untouchable. And all the water, whatever is going to go from the roof, it's going to be, when we're going to do the sidewalk, we also say we're going to do curbs. And it's going to help with the storm water a lot in this area. Even the Washington Park Boulevard doesn't have any curbs in this area. We're going to install.
So in general, just to follow up there, is this area under question, is this at a lower or higher gradient than the areas that are already developed in the south end there of Beach Walk?
grade wise,
Yeah, the height, where we, which
it's
way
a
are we
little,
tilted?
it's high, a little somewhat higher than the Beach Walk area.
Is it not possible to connect to the stormwater system in that Lake Hills neighborhood? Like, doesn't that pipe that goes through their land join the stormwater system?
Sanitary district did not recommend that at our review.
But that is a stormwater system.
They did not tell us where it was because it was
That
where,
pipe that goes through their land is connects to the stormwater system. It
But
comes
they're-
from Beach
but
Walk.
they're probably saying it's not big enough to connect
Okay.
or it's not in the right
So
location.
there is a stormwater system, but it's not adequate for them to connect to. So the other houses in that Lake Hills
I do not know that for a
neighborhood-
fact. They did not recommend it at our review.
So there's a pipe going through their land that comes from Beach Walk. It was put in the late 2000s to pump Lake High, but that connects to the Lake Hills stormwater system. I'm just asking the question, why can these houses not have their stormwater going in there also?
So sanitary looks at the bioretention and the calculations that Mr. Doyle provides, and that's how they make their decision. It's a very specific. They're taking runoff and how much water can be absorbed by the land, how much land is available to be absorbed. That's how they do that calculation. I defer to them. I don't know that they made a comment tonight.
I guess the question I have is that at the west end, the retention ponds are pretty small. it's obviously, they're quite large at the east side. So we should probably be looking at the worst case scenario. Are the lots 1, 2, 3, 4, where the ponds are really small, are those adequate for those houses? I guess those are the more of the concern than the ones with the big lots.
I guess I would say that you still got to think about the impervious surface. So as a lot goes down in size, the impervious surface goes down theoretically too. The size of the house goes down. Like you're having less. That's how it's controlled. It's like a hierarchy of that.
And I believe,
I guess I was
based on our discussions, and maybe Skylar, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think you'd remember better. I think that stormwater plan had to plan for a 1 in 100 year storm on a worst case scenario basis, correct?
correct. And yes, you are correct. Yeah.
From our calculations, out of the 2.6 acres, roughly about 6,500 of an acre would be impervious soil. That's with all the homes, driveways, everything else. So you still have about 2 acres left in those retention.
Could you state those numbers again? What?
About 6/10 of an acre, hard surface, roofs, driveways, that type thing. So that would be,
6 cents of an acre total?
yes, be about 30,000 square feet.
Okay.
Yeah, roughly 30,000.
Okay.
So as a percentage, it's about a third.
Yeah. Any other questions from commissioners or from the public? Step up and state your name and address, please.
My name is Allie Lawn, and I live at 802 Washington Park Boulevard, so I'd be a direct neighbor. I have 3 probably pretty easy questions. Number 1, can we as neighbors and community people have access to any of these plans? Are these public on a wall here somewhere, or is there something online? I couldn't find anything online.
They're viewable in the planning department office. Or if you're a direct neighbor, you should have got notified.
I did get notified. I didn't get any plans, so it's just
It tells you to come to the planning office and review them so you can see the paper copies.
My next questions were about the trees. Being a direct neighbor, I have seen how the trees were marked. Some of them were marked with little white dots on them. They were out there measuring them. Is that something that's also part of your little tree thing? Okay, and my next question is, when is the building planning to start? And is this something that's going to happen all at once? And I want to know, like, beginning and end of the chaos that might be happening next door. Thank you.
Yes, right. So regarding your third question, if commission going to be approved, subdivision going to be approved, we thinking about breaking the ground at probably the end of July. And it's not going to be all in once. It's going to be step by step. We don't want to. So basically, we're going to build right away one model, which going to be, we hope it's going to be accomplished by the end of October, beginning mid of November. And then from this, we're going to go with the pre-sales. And this is the only, at this time when things are not, let's say, economical, look not very good. We don't want to build everything and sit and wait over there. So we're going to go step by step. We're going to get the contract. All these houses, our plan is initial to be modular homes. So they're going to be pre-built on a factory. And pretty much we're going to do by the, probably it's going to be 2 or 3 phases. So we're going to build 4 houses and 4 houses and then 4 houses, something like this. It's hard to predict right now, but as of the plan of right now, this is how we look at this.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment?
Steve Johnson, 208 Murray Lane, Beachwalk. The study that they were talking about, is there a possibility we get a study for that water retention that they were talking about? Or?
We don't
don't require that?
We actually have sanitary district review those and make comments at the development review committee meeting when we met. They had no concerns about it at that meeting.
Well, just wherever it is possible.
I don't. Yeah, it's possible. I don't know if Mr. Doyle wants to provide it or whatever he provided.
You have one?
Well, I have calculations. I don't have them available this evening.
I mean, because we're just, I mean, the calculation I understand, but when we get the rain, I mean, because we've had issues in Beach Walk with, like, as Rachel was speaking, you know, it does flood, but at that point, when the houses are in, it's too late, you know?
Yeah.
So we're just trying to see if we could see that, if that's possible.
So from a planning standpoint, we don't review.
You don't review it.
That is reviewed by the sanitary department. They're in charge of runoff, stormwater, MS4, anything like that. They're in charge of it. They have a hydraulic engineer there that reviews all that. He was at our meeting when we met about this specific project. Like I said, he would have brought up his concerns at that. I mean, he actually liked the bioretention idea.
Is there bioretention in any subdivision that we could see? Is there another subdivision you guys have that have bioretention?
We do. I mean, bioretention is just a word saying that we're not going to do a pond here. We're going to do individual ponds, if you will. That's essentially what we're creating.
But is there any other subdivision that has that now in Michigan City?
I can't think of one offhand. We haven't really had one to come in like this because most of the subdivisions we have been.
They have their own.
Well, no, they've been south. They've been in the recent years have been north of 12, where, as Mr. Doyle alluded to, you have sand up there.
How about the
Yeah.
the parking lot in Washington Park?
That is bioretention. That's a
So if you
example,
wanna see
but
what
that's
that
an
looks like.
pretty extreme example.
You're talking about the new one that they just put in?
Yeah, that's a built bioretention. He's talking about leaving trees and really working around when he alludes to form built. They're not going to come in with a bulldozer.
Bulldozer just.
Yeah, they're going to form them up as kind of using natural contour of the land, essentially. Which, if you look at that land, it's not flat.
No, it's
very
very hilly. Yeah.
And then he did provide there's a topo map in here. That's what basically sanitary district was looking at, topo map to see how the flow of water, where it was going, and you know that was one of their not a concern once they saw the bioretention. But is there a subdivision that has bioretention right now? Not to my knowledge. In the last 8 years that's done this. It's a much better probably way to build in sensitive areas where you're not wiping down every tree.
Right. Yeah.
It's much better than.
I get that. Yeah. I mean, I understand that. But okay. Thank you.
My comment is that I think we ought to do whatever we can working with the sanitation department and these people here who have the concern to make sure that they're satisfied that what we're doing and that these ponds work and that do it. You know, they're on sand also. To say it's sand is the same. They're in sand, you know, so obviously sand doesn't soak up all the water in Beach Walk. Can't soak up all the water here either. We got to make sure that they're comfortable with this before we go ahead too much farther.
How are you doing? I'm Tom O'Malley, 501 Washington Park Boulevard. And what it is the grade going west from there, you know, drains down towards where my house is. And the stuff to the west of me drains to the east. Now, my big concern is he's talking about the houses being placed towards the front end of the lot facing Washington Park Boulevard. In a lot of cases, what the big thing now is they have the hard surface, everything, they're going to try and drain it off to the south. If they dump it in the street, they don't have curb gutter to control it. The other point is, what people do today is they run, downspouts, and from the downspouts they run tile, and then they have the tile being dumped in the street. And I'm very concerned about that because presently there is, after a heavy rain, they're going through puddles through there. So that's my experience. So that's my concern.
So I don't think the idea is to drain into the street here, though. You have bioretention in front.
Are they doing
Yeah.
something to prevent that from being done?
The bioretention is called for in the front of the house as well, and it's in the easement where there's actually going to be a sanitary sewer go in, and probably water pipe go through there as well. There's an easement there, so they won't be able to build on that, and it'll become another bioretention area there.
Okay,
In the
as
front.
long as
But-
you're not draining it.
But no, your concerns, they were a little bit, the sanitary district, when they first glanced, saw the elevations there and were like, well, but the bioretention should take, then they started doing the calculations. We could condition, if it so approves, we could condition them on working with the sanitary district to assure that,
Yeah, just so it's not running into.
to review Mr. Doyle's numbers and make sure that the ponds are sized appropriately. You can condition approval of these, but I'll leave it up to the board if you so desire, but that, you could do that.
Can we just, this drawing explains a lot. Can we just lend it to them to let them look at right now? Yeah. Just lend it to them and show them all the retention around the houses.
But if they put a deed restriction where people can't drain the water,
They won't be able to do anything in this area.
but it talks about stormwater, gutter, runoff.
No, you can't run gutters. It's actually, you can't run gutters.
I understand what it is. We have the tap-up drain running in, so they're going to be required to run all their gutters.
They have to retain on site. Virtually what he's saying is each house has to retain their own water on this. Like, this house is not even supposed to water on this house. This guy's not supposed to run on here. I mean, that's the way. So is this ditch or not?
Probably not ditch.
It's just,
Because you'll have a pipe there.
Can I ask a question while they look at the plans?
Why don't we just finish this first, then
So here's a retention area.
yeah, see, because it's deeper back here, you have a bigger retention. This is also a bigger piece of property.
You can also see how their trees lay out. So what they're trying to reserve back there is the trees in the back. Like I said,
So this is their official tree study?
this is a tree survey. Identified trees. Certain ones don't get identified if they're invasive. So only hardwoods or locusts.
Has
Yes.
mulberry.
So they identified all of them. They're not required to, but oaks, things like that, they'll keep. But as you can see,
There's a huge one someplace, right around here, but I just like right. I mean, that's the guy.
you can see how the retention. Cottonwoods.
There's a huge. They wouldn't clean a lot already.
Yeah, they're not gonna try to, I don't think they.
I mean, there's a tree with, unfortunately, you gotta take it out, it's not your.
Just so long as they're not branching.
We won't, so that's an issue with the really zoning, we can't let them drain, we can't let them drain.
I know, but here, you see those driveways? What it is you. Oh, yeah, it ran onto the driveway and ran into the street. What did you
did say, okay, curb and gutter.
Curb,
So,
gutter.
they're putting curb and gutter in, so why is there no natural drainage in?
Because there's not a drain.
There's no place to go.
Pipe there.
Thank you very much.
And this works to retain that.
I mean, what we do, I mean, usually when a new developer comes in, they're responsible for, drainage, I mean, in a town like this, when it was to cover any type of, virtually, road improvement virtually is what it is.
Yeah, they're not required to do a road improvement here.
Not at all.
If it was a subpar road from the way it was built, but it was built to a standard at the time, that's when if this was an 18-foot road of pavement, we would make them upgrade that road.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, it's not a substandard road. It
Yeah.
can carry traffic.
Oh, yeah, yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have another question.
Gordon Davidson, 109 Mary Lane. Just talking about the water plans. What happens if the bioretention fails? What type of remedy does the Beach Walk community have if water's pouring over the higher graded level to our?
So that's between the developers at this time. It would be a civil issue at that time. But, if the calculations are correct and sanitary is reviewing them correctly, it won't happen or shouldn't happen. But it does become a civil issue, just like if I run a drain on my neighbor's property, which we've dealt with before, it becomes an issue between those two neighbors in the courts at that point in time.
Okay. Second question is, do you guys have basements? No. Okay.
I did have one more question, just for my curiosity. Hearing the discussions about bioretention areas, with this plan, I see all the elevation gradients running through this second map here. Is that going to change post-development? I mean, all these are what it is now, correct? So is there going to be any alteration to where these bioretention areas will be a little lower by the end, or is this going to stay pretty true?
Well, I would stay as true as we can make it, but once you get the residences in, which are roughly a foot to a foot and a half higher than Washington Park Boulevard, and then you begin to fill around for landscaping or that part. So they'll get bigger. They may get smaller, but in the end product, we're going to have 2 acres of open ground that you can dispose of the stormwater. Again, there is no stormwater runoff into beach walk area. It's all coming or will be graded in the back, at least come into the back of the houses and so forth where we're at. We're proposing curb and gutter on Washington Park Boulevard. There are some low areas there. We propose to put storm drains in and then run pipe back into dry wells in that retention area, bioswale area. So we'll be taking the water off of Lakeshore Drive or Washington Park Boulevard and putting it in basically in our development. And that was be 3 locations through there.
That's where the grades are lower on.
Right.
Where the grades are lower on that street, they're actually going to be accepting runoff off the street.
The street will be, in order to match up the grade with the new curb and so forth, there will be a little, maybe 2-3 foot strip of Washington Park Boulevard that'll be rebuilt and repaved just to make everything match up.
Skylar, maybe you know the answer to this, and maybe it's what you just said about it becomes a civil issue. But let's say 10 years down the road, a future owner or a different owner decides that they want to re-landscape their property and fill in all those retention basins. Then is there any kind of a covenant that says that they have to maintain those? Or if they cause flooding problems, then it becomes a civil issue?
So we can't require covenants on things. We don't get involved in land covenants. That is the one thing we do not get involved in. It would be up to the developer right now to set a covenant. So let's take, for example, Whisper Dunes has a covenant, has a protected, it's also a planned unit development. It has a protective covenant because they had to set aside 25% of that development for protection, meaning that it has to stay natural. You're not allowed to build in it. The only thing you're really allowed to do is walk across it and recreate in it. But that's just an example. This isn't a PUD, so it doesn't require that set aside. But the way that that's set aside is through restrictive easement, if you will. It's really not even a covenant. It's a restrictive easement at that point in time. I don't know what the intention of, I would say without a protection mechanism like that, then you're still back to, okay, I designed my house, or I wanted to take down that 100-year-old tree in the back, and now everyone's yards are flooding, which, trees do hold a lot of water. When you cut them down, they flood. That's the problem. That's one of the problems. So I'd say it would still be a civil issue at that time if there wasn't a protective covenant, HOA association to say, hey, can I take down that tree? It's fault. Eventually all the trees are going to die at some point in time. I mean, it's probably a long way away. So, but I don't know if that's is something that the developer intends to do. it really wouldn't be through us at that point.
Okay.
The only time we get involved in HOAs is through PUDs, planning and developments.
With respect to the filling of the bioretention areas, there would be a covenant or part as a condition of the sale of the land that they cannot be filled up, destroyed.
Good, thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, any other public comment? Questions from either commissioners or the public? Or Skylar? Okay.
I was just going to say, if it's something that the commission would consider, you can approve these with conditions. If you want them to take a second look at a condition of approval, second look with work with Steve Stanford, have him take a look at everything again. I would be okay with that. If you do want to go that route.
So
was just gonna, go ahead. I'm sorry.
At this point, though, they're done and they've given their stamp of approval on this?
They didn't offer, I wouldn't say it's a stamp of approval. It's just they didn't offer, they reviewed this and reviewed what's being proposed in this concept plan, and they didn't offer a alternative to that. Typically, they'll come in and say, wait, we have a sanitary line here. Instead of doing this, we want you to connect here and get rid of it. Honestly, in this area, they probably prefer the bioretention over that because you're just tearing up less at that point. You're encouraging them to keep trees and things of that nature. You're encouraging it to kind of work around the trees, if you will. At that point in time, you come in and just, what's the point of holding the water on your site? I mean, from a developer standpoint.
Okay.
So as a part of our approval, we can add a requirement that there is a review of the statistics that the developer has in hand with the sanitary district before we plat.
Absolutely. And remember, this isn't a plat. This isn't primary. Primary still has to come. Secondary happens after that. And even in between primary and secondary, there could be things that have to be approved. Right now, you're at a concept plan, and you're basically saying, in general, we're okay with this. If this is, but there can be conditions put on this that have to be kind of, when they bring primary back, when they bring primary back to you, that Mr. Doyle may have to provide a little bit more on calculations, at that point in time.
Do any of those steps require the stormwater runoff to be studied, or is that?
I would say, yeah, they do. I mean, the primary, yes.
So that would be adequately addressed during the primary plat.
Yep. And if there was say sanitary district comes back and says, we want these to be a little bit deeper, a little bit wider, a little bit bigger, they would have to address those before we could sign off on secondary plat at that point, if there's major concerns like that.
Okay.
So there's another whole step to this process
Okay.
that gets a full another public hearing as well. Just keep that in mind. And then that's when we're actually looking at the plat. I know this is a plat, but we're actually looking at how it's actually going to be subdivided, and then what easements are in place in between primary and secondary. That's when they would work probably with sanitary district. If there was a main that needed to go in, they would come up with construction documents to their satisfaction to build that main so that it could be accepted by them, because they don't build it. Water builds theirs, sanitary does not. So that would be accepted to their standards. There's a lot of other things that have to fall into place before we get to the final secondary plat, which is final plat, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
So yeah, my general impression is I don't think the neighborhood has a problem with the development per se, the amount of development, the size of the establishments being built or anything like that. It's more the stormwater concerns. And I don't, maybe we don't need to officially add it to this approval, but maybe just keep that in mind for the development team when we come to the primary plat stage and have that ready for the neighborhood to look at and address when we get to that stage.
Correct. Okay, any more comments from anybody about anything related to this?
Well, I think the concept and the development plan is a great idea. It's what Michigan City needs. We need more homes. There's been study after study indicating that this is exactly the direction we need to go. And from that point of view, with the caveats that we have here, I think it's something that's beneficial to the town. And so, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I just add one more comment? I really feel like there's a lot of issues with stormwater and some concerns. I think memorializing it as a condition of approval would be probably appropriate, not to overstep, but you guys make that decision, okay? That's up to you, the plank. I'm just making a recommendation, but it's your guys' decision ultimately.
So you want us to include a condition with the,
It's just memorializing that the concern exists and to make sure that it's addressed at primary,
okay.
which I'm sure it will be, but like I said, it's putting it into a document.
Okay.
So,
So at this point, public comment is closed. And if there's no further discussion from the commissioners, we would be open for a motion.
All right, correct me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Hale, but I would move for approval of petitions 900-22, section 1 and 2, the concept and development plan based on their fitting the subdivision ordinance and our zoning ordinances, and would also add a condition that the water runoff be addressed with the sanitary district and the planning department before primary plat approval. Is that adequate, Mr. Hale?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Then I'll second it.
Mr. Balling,
Yes.
Mr. Gresham,
Yes.
Mr. Klinder,
Yes.
Mr. Latchford,
Yes.
Mr. Zimmer,
Yes.
motion approved.
Good luck. We look forward to seeing your development.
So for primary, just for the public, for primary plat, it'll have to go through basically the same process again, and they'll get noticed and things of that nature. So it's not like this is the end, if you will. You'll get noticed. If you all got noticed, you'll get the same notices again. Just keep in mind, we do have it on for review. You can come down to the planning office. We'll pull it out for you and lay it all out for you, and you can feel free to ask questions. We have it available there. It's in a little folder right behind our desk.
The next item is new business, old business. And I think Skylar has some documents he wants us to review.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about them, and then I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Borngraber. He's done an excellent job of really helping me put these documents together, because they're I think they've been a long time coming. So what we're doing from a planning department or kind of our departmental, we're trying to standardize and make all our documents look better and also cleaner and also consistent. So that being said, before you tonight, we have two documents. One is a brand new document, and I'll explain why it's a brand new document. And then one is what you see as a petition for anything that gets filed before us. This is just a new petition to you guys. You'll notice in here there's a checklist. Really what this is to say we're spending an exorbitant amount of time getting information. Really, we need the information right then to make these decisions, so that we can contemplate or ask for other really important information. But just getting the basic information is really kind of what this at. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Aaron, and then let's take them one at a time. Does that make sense? Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. Aaron Borngraber, Assistant Planning Director. So in one of your packets, there is instructions for filing a petition before the City of Michigan City Plan Commission. It is a 12-page document. This is where awareness. So the Historic Preservation Commission has approved a simplified version of this application, as well as last month, the Board of Zoning Appeals, actually this month, right? This month, the Board of Zoning Appeals has approved a similar application. There are different things that are relevant for different commissions, but largely the formatting is the same. Some things are slightly changed. So pages 1 through 3 are various checklist items that need to be submitted for a completed petition for the Planning Commission. The most notable change here is a change to the notification requirements that staff is proposing. As of right now, the notification requirement is to notice adjacent property owners. And if there's a stream, a road, then you just go across that stream. What we are proposing and the Board of Zoning Appeals has approved is creating a 300-foot radius buffer. That will increase the notification of the surrounding property owners, as well as being more transparent. Included in this, towards the bottom section, is actually how to do this. And that's how to do it in Beacon. It's a very short and simple task. You can get your mailing labels, you can get the map all printed. Takes about 5 minutes for someone who knows what they're doing. For someone who doesn't, it'll probably take a little bit longer. But this also eliminates the confusion of what do I need to notice someone? Because it's just a buffer. And you notice everyone who touches. So it creates a 300-foot buffer. If the properties are within that buffer, even if it just touches it slightly, you notify them. So it's really just meant to simplify that and also just increase that radius and for the public to be aware of projects that they may not be otherwise aware of. It does have the potential to have less notification if there is a substantial right-of-way or stream. That's probably not going to happen, but that is an opportunity as well. So there's some formatting changes as well to that. Another change is the consent of the property owner. The affidavit has been removed, and either the petitioner needs to be the owner needs to be the petitioner, and the owner are the one and the same, or they need to include a power of attorney or an authorization letter. On page 4, there is the application deadlines as well as the meeting dates for the Planning Commission. I believe one of these dates does need to be amended as it's actually on a holiday and no one's going to be here. But this is also so that people are very aware what are the actual deadlines. And this is an application that will at least be updated yearly and potentially in between that for additional clarifications. For example, with the Historic Preservation Commission, they approved it in, I believe, January, and I probably have done about 3 or 4 revisions. That's just tweaking slight wording to make it more clear. None of that is really changing what needs to be submitted, just changing the language so it's clearer.
His point is it's kind of a living document in that there's always we wouldn't have to bring this back to you guys every time. We would just, unless we're changing like 300 feet to 600 feet. Well, that's a significant change. Just want to get that out to the public.
All right, so page 5, 6, and 7 are really the meat of the application. This is where you actually start filling out something. And this is going to be, what is your request, contact information, owner information, information about the use of the property, any waivers, legal description. Page 7 has the petition fees that are associated with various items that go in front of this body. Page 8 is a list of the surrounding property owner lists. Page 9 is the public notification requirement that clearly also indicates 300-foot radius buffer that staff is proposing. Page 10 is just the LaPorte County Herald and Dispatch notice requirements. And I just want to indicate that this was a comment that has been added. The petitioner, not the newspaper, is responsible for meeting this deadline and must plan with this in mind. So it's very clear of the burden of responsibility for that. There is a notice of public hearing on page 11 with the information that needs to be submitted. And then there is affidavit of service. So this document, I would say, is about 98% complete. So just some final changes. If it is approved tonight, staff is really looking for 2 motions. The first is to change the notification to a 300-foot radius buffer. And the second is to approve the application as presented with small changes being approved by changes by staff as necessary based on feedback from the public. It won't really change what has to be submitted. I'll just change the wording. And I will defer to Skylar York for any additional comments.
We'll just keep in mind, just so we're clear. We worked with Attorney Hale on this. We reviewed it. This is still a draft, obviously, got draft stamped on it. We just feel that it's kind of time to upgrade our process and make sure that we're getting the correct information to get to you guys, so you feel comfortable with what we're recommended. I feel like, as an example, the one tonight, they gave us a lot of information. It's probably more than we've gotten with some of the other, like a lot of subdivisions. Obviously, this is one that's in an area that requires that, but it would be nice to have as much information as we possibly can, so that we know, so that we're comfortable making a recommendation to you. And in all honesty, this is really bare minimum of things that really need to be submitted to us. We in review of I've worked in other communities, Mr. Borngraber has as well. This is really bare minimum for what we need to make decisions. I would just leave it at that. 300-foot buffer. We talked a lot about that one, and it's been talked about a lot at council. It's been talked a lot about in public for certain things like a rezoning. Those do have bigger effects than, say, something like, this rezoning subdivisions, as you saw tonight, they all have big effects on people. Right now, you're noticing the adjacent. With respect to that, it could be a lot. It could be little people or a little bit of people, but it's always been talked about. Well, we should have a buffer. Lots of cities around here have the buffers. I believe numerous ones in our community or surrounding communities have buffers. So I'll leave it at that. And if there's any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, I've got 2 quick questions if you can. So the 300-foot buffer, is that from like every corner of what's changing or what's being addressed? So like take tonight where we've got 2.7 acres. Is that 300 feet from every direction away from all of that affected area?
That is 300-foot buffer that's created from the property lines of the subject property radiating outward.
Got it. So like tonight would have affected. So instead of maybe just the lots across the street in Beach Walk, it could have been 2 or 3 deep because those lots are so small.
Correct. So it will obviously vary depending on the actual project.
Sure.
But it would definitely increase the transparency and public notice of more people are notified of what this body does, so that they can provide input in the planning process. And just in other communities I have worked in, there has been, and we're not proposing this, posting of signage, not proposing.
Sure. Definitely seen it in Valpo.
There's also, the buffer was actually 500 feet, not proposing, once again. 300 feet tends to be a nice buffer. It's nice middle ground. It's not too much, but it's not too little. And that, there's some kind of mock properties I did, because this was also in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals, different application, but same noticing requirement. And that may be 7 or 8 properties, and that becomes about 30, 32. That's obviously going to change depending on the property, and especially some of the larger properties that would increase because they have a much larger area that they're covering. However, with the use of Beacon, you can just print labels. So the burden on the applicant to fulfill that, we don't believe is high, because labels can be generated, the map can be generated, and you're just printing that and including that information.
Yeah, I might add that when you're dealing with, so say that I hate to use the one from tonight, but let's just use it because it's there, it's in front of us. If you think about the amount of people in that area, let's say the density of people, this does affect more people than just the adjacent people. Let's I mean, I'm just going to be really honest about it. It does. No, they met their notice requirements. In a piece of land, say that we're out on, let's just take Tryon Road, lots of open farmland out there. There's big lots out there. The impact probably may not, well, the probability of impactfulness is probably less because you have more buffering, if you will, from vacant land. So it makes sense, I guess, if you will, just the order of magnitude, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of the day, this is only going to potentially increase the number of people noticed because right now you're notifying everyone who's being touched.
Correct.
Which in theory should still be happening with 300 feet because you're still touching. And then, in an area like this or Sheridan Beach, for example, that has teeny tiny lots, it might actually increase it a little bit. The other question I had real quick was the notification area. Is there a reason we still do newspaper notifications? Is that like state law or is that, It is. Okay.
Which
I assume that that's going to change in the near future, but who knows? But it is required of state law.
Okay.
I think it says something to if one exists in your town, you have to use it or something like that, or.
Understood. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Zimmer, if I may?
Oh, yes.
I'd weigh in first on this last discussion. Prior to serving as your counsel, I had a private practice that included a great deal of real estate matters, including specifically filing a lot of petitions before various boards of zoning appeals and plan commissions throughout the 3 counties of Northwest Indiana. So I feel I have some practical experience in dealing with that. And I would just tell you that there are several communities that have found that they can operate well with a 300-foot notification process. Some are more strict. Of course, many of them are like we are and just requiring a property that touches the affected property. That has the advantage, I suppose, of being rather readily apparent, but with the advent of the computer and the assistance of Beacon, it really becomes a rather simple process for everybody to fulfill that requirement. It will require more notice to more people. That means it will cost a little bit more. But it seems to me in today's age that you should be weighing what you think about that versus the added transparency that Mr. Borngreber is trying to introduce. The other thing that I'd like to talk about in my experience is that we've had this question come up many times about who is the owner of the property. And I know that I have on many occasions had to undertake extra work to find out, because I won't come here and advise you unless I'm sure about these things, who the owner is, because we have petitioners that appear by way of an engineer surveyor, by way of a spokesman, by way of the sign company manager, by way of an attorney. I use that last one because we have always found that attorneys have been given the privilege of being able to sign for their clients. And this is going to be a change because it does not exclude attorneys who are representing their clients from this requirement. And there may be some feedback from that because they have done it for a long time. And attorneys are by law allowed to bind their clients and therefore could sign. But I think my reading of what is being proposed requires that the homeowner must either sign, or the property owner, must sign, or submit a letter of authorization or a power of attorney to permit that. And so that's a change from what our practice has been up to this point. I think it helps us, it helps me anyway, in feeling that we've got a better grasp of what is being requested and who's requesting it. So those are two changes from a legal standpoint that I think you should be aware of and include in part of your thinking when you consider this proposal.
Is there any public comment related to this? I don't think so. So then I guess, are we ready for a motion? If there's no further discussion or questions?
If I may have two motions.
Yes. One for each one.
Yeah.
Two motions, one for the radius change to make it clear, because it is a significant policy change, and the other for the application. As the recommended approach, if the commission desires.
That's the process that we followed, if I recall correctly, with the BZA too. We made a special approval of that.
Right.
Because it is a big change.
So both documents
Just
are going to
the
be
petition.
covered by the
They
we're just talking about the petition? Okay.
Well, in that case, I would move to approve the change of notification from adjoining properties to the new 300-foot buffer standard.
Okay, there's a motion.
I second.
We have a second.
I'll call the vote. Mr. Balling,
Yes.
Mr. Gresham,
Yes.
Mr. Klinder,
Yes.
Mr. Latchford,
Yes.
and Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Motion approved for the 300-foot buffer.
And then if I may, can you give me just a little bit more for the second one? We're looking to approve the petition subject to minor clerical changes. Is that the idea?
I'll refer that to Steve Howe.
That is what Mr. Bordengraver is asking for. That you approve the document as a required document of all petitioners, and that you grant the planning department authority to make non-substantive minor changes.
I think that's a good word, non-substantive,
I
like,
like that.
yeah, as to a, type things, or cleaning up things.
All right, well, I will move then for the second motion to approve these new application petitions subject to any non-substantive changes that the planning office may need to make, such as date changes, etc.
Second.
Second.
I'll call for the vote. Mr. Balling,
Yes.
Mr. Gresham,
Yes.
Mr. Klinder,
Yes.
Mr. Latchford,
Yes.
and Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Motion approved. Thank you.
Oh, I have one more. No, I got it. Okay, going to
This one is also associated with the map that was provided. So sorry.
yes. So there is a instructions for filing a development plan before the City Planning Commission. As Skylar York has stated, there is a 11x17 piece of paper that was handed out at the start of the meeting. It's probably under a piece of paper. That is our North End Form-Based Overlay District. It is a form-based overlay that's meant to kind of regulate the form of building, the massing of buildings, and less the uses of buildings. So it is still a land use code underneath that. As a part of that provision of Article 13, there is a requirement that all new construction for mixed-use buildings, commercial buildings, multifamily buildings, essentially anything that is taxed as commercial. Single-family duplexes would be excluded from that to go in front of the Planning Commission for approval. Since that code has been adopted in 2010, there has not been anything that would meet that requirement. There's always been additions to buildings, some very large, but still additions. And that was up to the enforcement official or officer per the zoning code. So this is an application that does not previously exist, is brand new. And this is what someone would need, a developer would need to submit for if they were submitting a proposal for review. The process would generally be if it was in a historic district, which most of that map in front of you is in the historic district, not all of it, would go to the Historic Preservation Commission for approval first, then go to development review for comments of various departments, and then go in front of the Planning Commission for final approval before they can go to permitting. So as a part of that, there is that application had to be created. It's not quite a petition because they're not petitioning anything. And just so the commissioners are aware of, having a planning commission approval of certain types of projects is not unusual. Several communities do it. Some do it citywide, some do it for section areas. It all varies depending on the zoning ordinance. But in our particular zoning ordinance, it's relevant for the North End form-based code. So starting on page 1 here, it's relatively the same. Does require a site plan or a survey. Page 2 is where some details are different, especially from the Planning Commission application. It says architectural drawings, a project data table, and a project data table is just the required zoning requirements as well as the proposed zoning requirements. So if the front setback is supposed to be a minimum of 25 feet, they need to indicate what their setback they're proposing is. They need to put 25. If it's less than 25, then that actually requires a variance, maybe, or a waiver. It's not quite clear on that yet. But they need to indicate what they're proposing. So it's meant to be essentially a cheat sheet for the commissioners and staff to know what it's meeting the zoning code. There's a site plan package as indicated in table 23.03 of our zoning code. It lists the details that are required. Some of these do overlap and they don't have to include everything if it's already being proposed in here. The legal description, just as in the petition for the Planning Commission that you just approved, there is the 300-foot buffer requirement in here as well. 11 on page 3 is the petitioner's affidavit of service and newspaper affidavit, and then there is the consent of the property owner. Most of this application is the same as the petition application, just things that are not relevant have been taken out. Some things have been added. Page 4 actually has one big change under staff report. So in section 13.01, there is a list of intentions. These intentions are the guiding rules that the commission needs to make a decision based off of. And it does stay at the very bottom, the applicant is not required to provide findings and facts to the standards provided above. If the commission does not agree with that, you may add that as a requirement. But this is the criteria that the commission will be deciding on their approval conditions, or denial.
Can I jump in there? So unlike Board of Zoning Appeals, we have findings of fact where we have to answer these questions. This really didn't provide us, does it meet this? It's really giving you a way to weigh what you're reviewing. Do we feel that it meets directing urban growth into the city's north end? I guess if we can say yes to all those, and we feel that it meets that, or we agree that it meets the guidance here. Determine that it meets, yes, find that it meets this. I guess that's the basis for approval. I would just add that right now there's a lot of interest in our north end. And when we are reviewing the code to make sure that we're guiding developers and providing information to them of processes and procedures, that's where this came up. And we're like, well, how do we do this? And it specifically says that Planning Commission has to approve a development plan anywhere inside this area. So
Yes, they are these, in the code it's listed as intentions, but in practice they are the standards. And these standards are open-ended. So there is opportunity for interpretation of that, but that would also guide you to look at other documents that the city has essentially adopted, such as the comprehensive plan, other sections of the zoning code. Also, in the case of the properties located within a historic district, what were the findings and decision of the Historic Preservation Commission?
I would also add that keep in mind these items here that you see are also regulated by, there is an underlying use and there is an underlying form code. So, how do I want to say this? Because it says regulate building height and placement to achieve appropriate scale. If you look at what's allowed in these certain colored areas, you're going to see the ability to build higher there. You know, even though we may like a one-story, we may not like it higher. We may feel, but there are some by right entitlements that are associated with this code. I would just add that in there to, just keep in mind there's a balance to it all.
So can I just jump in here real quick? With these, A through I in mind, do we have an example of something potentially that could be coming or that's been discussed publicly that might fit into this? Like we would get a development plan for maybe the 11th Street station or just to kind of make the connection in my mind.
All right, so there's several projects that would fall under the purview of this application, the purview of the Planning Commission. For example, the 11th Street Station would apply, but also the housing development on Michigan Boulevard and 8th Street would apply. The You Are Beautiful site would apply.
It doesn't have to be
there's several
comprehensive.
projects that are coming in the near future that would apply, and they would be a part of staff's recommendation. Would not only be A through I here, but also the zoning review compliance. Because, for example, several of these properties are under the CBD1, which is Central Business District zoning, but also the form-based code, which is what's authorizing the Planning Commission to actually review these, has its own requirements such as regulating materials, massing, setbacks. So there's multiple layers of code that apply and that will be reviewed. But these are, A through I is essentially the final justification for an approval, or if it requires it, a denial.
Yeah.
Or potentially approval of conditions if something has been determined, not feels, not to be compliant with one of these requirements. So as I mentioned, the commission could decide that they are required. That's entirely up to you if you would like to add that requirement. It's not currently proposed to be a requirement. Other bodies such as Board of Zoning Appeals, there is findings that need to be submitted. There's also findings that need to be submitted for other commissions, and that so there is opportunity for that change if they would see. And Skylar, did you have any?
No, I think you did a good job of summarizing that. What else? I had a thought in my head. It really is. I think the intention of this form-based code was to really unsuburbanize our downtown, as we did a long time ago. We built one-story buildings, which really was more of a suburban development, one story with lots of green space around. It really isn't a downtown development. And I mean, if you read through these and then you read through our code that's associated with this form base, it really is about encouraging pedestrian orientation, building back our block faces, not tearing down buildings for parking lots. It's really, really oriented around keeping that form, either building back the form downtown or maintaining a form in downtown that feels good when you walk beside it. It's transit oriented. It's pedestrian friendly. It's those catchphrases, if you will, that you hear read in documents. And I think that's really in general what you're going to see A through I here if you read through them. But anyways, I don't want to belabor it.
Nope, that's fine. That's what I was curious of, trying to picture in my head where this would apply.
All right. You asked about examples. The reason we're before you tonight is because we don't have a process where, we have not just the three that you hear. We have individual people who are asking us about building down here outside the realm of anything you've seen, but we're stuck with saying, oh, but wait, this code exists. We don't know how to steer them, and
Sure.
and it's not just the projects that are out there in the public. It's other projects that are coming down on other vacant lots that the city doesn't even have any control over. It's just developers saying, or individual owners saying, hey, I'm ready to do this,
Understood.
So I'm just going to continue on page 5 is the application deadlines and meeting dates. And then page 6 really 6 and 7 are really the main meat of the application, which is putting the applicant information, the owner information, contact, the address, the parcel number, the subdivision, the zoning information for that property, as well as on page 7 is the signature page, which is the same as the previous application that was the petition. Page 8 is just the surrounding property owner list. Page 9 is the public notice requirements. Page 10 is the newspaper requirement. Page 11 is the notice of the public hearing. And lastly, on page 12, which is the same as the other application, is the affidavit of service. One benefit of having standardized applications is that if a developer or property owner of some kind needs to go through it, they're relatively consistent. That unfortunately also means once you need to make a change in one application, you likely need to make it in all. So it does have that downside. For this, there just needs to be one motion because this is entirely brand new. I believe that would be most appropriate, and that would just basically be similar to the second motion for approving the petition, as the radius has been kind of approved as a policy by the Planning Commission already, and this is a brand new application. I'll defer to Steve Howell for any further comments.
I think subject to the ability of the planning department to make non-substantive changes to the document.
All right, if it pleases the board, then I would move to approve our new development plan application, subject to any non-substantive changes that may be needed to be made by the planning department.
A second?
I'll call for the vote. Mr. Balling.
Yes.
Mr. Gresham.
Yes.
Mr. Klender.
Yes.
Mr. Latchford.
Yes.
And Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Motion approved. I really appreciate it. So now we have a clear path forward with some people who are waiting. I hope so for Mr. Klender. Probably. I'm not going to lie. It's probably going to be a little bit of muddling the first time we get one of these, so because we've never done it. But it's also very exciting. I think, in my opinion, to see not just what's in the newspaper, but other folks that own land downtown wanting to develop, and they're ready to put something on land that's been held for many, many years. I think that's exciting for Michigan City and our downtown. Good job, Aaron.
Nice work.
Also, just want to add that you're probably going to see the increased notification fairly quickly.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Aaron. Any other commissioner comments? I'll also open it to public comment if there's any public comment regarding this.
I would just like to make a comment. Being around
being around Michigan City for almost 25 years and being part of the park expansion and development of Michigan City. I just want to congratulate the staff for being so passionate about making Michigan City better and helping people like myself understand what you guys do. And I really appreciate it as being a citizen of Michigan City.
Thank you, Mr. Balling. Any other comments from anybody?
Yes, I wanted to congratulate Tyler on trying to take on the mall project, Marquette Mall project again. That was good to see. I hope there's something that can be done there. It's a huge eyesore and a sore to all of Michigan City, and it's a constant point of conversation. What are they going to do with that? And of course, I just keep telling them, well, the owner can tell you what he's going to do with it, and that's it. And I appreciate you trying to work with them to get something done.
Thank you. So that's not that. Yes, I'm involved in it. Mr. Hulse at the EDC has been involved in it as well. We have made contact with all of the owners, the larger parcel owners, and some of the smaller ones. They're all shaking their head like, yes, we need some help. We're going to provide that. I have a feeling once we're done with what we're doing that it will be back before this commission for probably hopefully, fingers crossed, a rezoning of some sort. It may be something new. It may be something that exists. It may be a customized zoning, but something that's effectively allows them to develop in a different manner there that is appropriate for the south end. If I was to compare the Marquette Mall, it's just as important in the south end as, say, the train station or other development that we're seeing in the north end. They both have a relationship to where they're at. There's 50 acres of land there. Everyone's shaking their head saying yes. So we're meeting for the first time this Friday with the group that we've engaged with, and I'm sure I would almost guarantee they'll be back before this board at some point in time to make some type of request. So that's just I just preface that with something to look forward to in the future.
With that topic being mentioned, is there any expectation of a timeline for, what you guys want to study and discuss and all that?
So the idea is not just to study it. It really is to take a look at what's the market saying that will work here. Like, I feel like as planners, we love to draw pretty pictures and do those things. We do. You guys know we do. But really it's to look at what is the market telling us will work here, and then let's draft something based on that and probably one or two scenarios. And really that becomes something we can hand to somebody or show somebody and say, we've taken the skepticism or the risk to some extent and put our money into this with the hope that you will take this and draw the same, a developer would draw the same conclusion saying, yeah, I think that scenario will work. But we're basically kind of proofing it, if you will, ahead of throwing it out there. I think Clarence told me there was something like 90 something ideas for the Marquette Mall when it went to Facebook or LinkedIn or something like that.
That sounds low.
Honestly, yeah, absolutely. Right. I've got ideas, but honestly, really basing that in what the market is demanding, and honestly, what our city needs to the standpoint of maybe there's housing that goes there. It's a mile exactly to the hospital, and things like that. Considering those uses around it, is that something that's viable? I'm not saying that's viable. We have to do the study to determine that, but things like that is kind of what we hope to achieve with this. Rather than just I don't think it'll be a booklet. It will probably be a pamphlet and then some analysis behind it. I do have one item. Plan Commission for May. I will be actually at a conference to talk about Marquette Mall to some site selectors that weekend. So I was hoping to have the Plan Commission, if we could move it to the 25th or 26th. Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was a split on who was available on either. correct? I'm sorry, you wrote it down and I'm so sorry. Of course you're efficient like that. I'm horrible. She wrote it down for me and it's right here in front of me. The 26th is the best for everybody. So if that works, we only didn't hear back from 2 folks on that one. Larry, I know you're out that whole week. But 2 folks were the only people that didn't reply. Everyone else, we would have a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the same amount on each one. So, okay. I believe I return on the 24th. It's your pleasure. If 2 people didn't respond, so haven't responded yet to our polling.
50-50 as far as the number of people that can attend, and et cetera. I recommend that you make it at your convenience so that you're best prepared for your meeting.
Okay, fair enough. So I'll be back on the 24th late. That gives me a day to make sure that everything's prepared and in place. We do have 2 petitions coming forward. So look, can we set it for the 26th, and I'll try to get the other 2 members to respond. That gives me a day to plan or to put together everything that needs to be done. And we'll try to get the other 2. And if it's looking, let's just set it for the 26th. Let's just do it.
Do we need a formal something vote?
We need a formal motion setting forth the time.
And we're within legal timeline of having enough notification to make a change?
Tonight, if we do it tonight, the petitioners are waiting for us to make a decision tonight. I can let them know tomorrow, and yes, they'll be able to get everything out in time. They're just waiting for the final decision.
And then public notice too, right?
Yes, absolutely. Public notice to the newspaper, all that has to get, right now they have time to do that.
Okay.
They got plenty of time, actually.
And it's important also that we announce it to the public at this meeting.
Yes, and keep in mind right now, there is a vesting. These petitions you're going to see, we just adopted our new ones tonight. These are going to be underneath the old petitions. Okay. So my point is, adjacent property owners are going to be notified. I can't go. They've already filed. They filed. Some of them filed a few weeks ago, but they're underneath the old petitions. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you get them. We just haven't incorporated this yet because we're just voted tonight.
You mean the old application?
The old applications. Correct.
In that case, I would move to make our May 2022 meeting Thursday, May 26th at 6 p.m. here in the council chambers.
Second.
We'll call for the vote. Mr. Ballin.
Yes.
Mr. Gresham.
Yes.
Mr. Klender.
Yes.
Mr. Lashford.
Yes.
And Mr. Zinner.
Yes.
Motion approved. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Do we have any word on when the CSX is going to do the work on the tracks on Tilden Street? It's been blocked for 6 months.
I do not, Fred. Board of Works has been handling that. I believe has been a topic of conversation, I think, every time I've been at Board of Works. So I do not know. I think mayor's working on it. I think some councilmen are as well. Unfortunately, CSX is a tough one to work with. They probably love having it closed. So, I mean, in all reality, I don't know. I don't know any more about that right now.
Yeah, I was afraid of that. That's the information I've got from the CSX too. Of course, I worked with them for years, and they were impossible to work with back then, 20 some years ago. And it doesn't look like they've improved much. But I, again, stand behind that when I say, hey, we're going to be working with a railroad that's tearing up Michigan City downtown right now. And they're a little bit different. They're a little bit better, but we're gonna run into those same kind of situations. And I understand Piney Street is blocked off permanently now, but then maybe we ought to think about what we should do with Franklin Street to make it two-way, as was brought about a number of years ago by that St. Andrews University study. When we made Piney Street and Washington Street two ways, they also recommended that Franklin Street be done that way.
Any other comments? Hearing none, then I guess we are adjourned until next month. Thank you, everyone.